You've got a Chancellor that has been reduced to tears in the front benches that now has to find £5 billion of savings.
He, in fact, seems completely oblivious that she is crying next to him.
He then more or less blew up his own anniversary by scheduling this very controversial bill.
Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction from Sky News with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
Me, Harriet, Harman, and I'm speaking in a calm voice, but that is not how I feel. But I'm going to try and not be what my children would describe as overstimulated on account of wanting to be, like a man speaking on a man podcast, gravitas and important. But honestly, it has been, I've been seriously overstimulated the last 24 hours, probably for the last about 4 days, but I'm going to mask it.
Can I ask how? Is it because you want to defend what's been going on? Is it because you've got your head in your hands at how it's been handled? Because you wish that you were back in at the top table and you were helping direct it? What's been the level of your stimulation?
Because I actually don't like political drama. Lots of people like political drama, but I think political drama is a bad thing. And I have got this thing where I think I know what needs to be done to stop it being dramatic and going wrong.
So you're a mama bear that's not just
I'm in advisory role.
Yeah.
She's an overstimulated mama bear.
I don't think there's anybody listening like when mums talk.
If you get between this mama bear and her cubs when she's overstimulated, like woe betide you.
Come for Rachel. Yeah, get smacked round the head by Harriet.
Well, actually, we'll get onto this because Harriet, you were quite worried, weren't you, at PMQs on Wednesday? You sent me a few messages. I was actually on the train to Wales, but anyway, we'll get to that. But look, talking about being overstimulated, I have to remind you, Ruth Davidson, that it was this time a year ago that we were gearing up for our all-nighter on television because it was election night. It was a year ago. It was the moment of that Labour landslide. Do you remember it? I mean,
I do.
It was an absolutely stonking result from
We had
Keir
Parma
Starmer.
ham, I remember.
Anyway,
I was overstimulated that night as well, I can tell you. As the results came in.
We're going to use this pod today to talk about the year in power, the year anniversary, the PM out talking about the 10-year NHS plan. That was how he wanted to mark the anniversary. That's what he wanted to do. But events, dear boy, events. I mean, the welfare stuff this week, it has been so chaotic and we need to go through what on earth has been happening. And also then Prime Minister's questions. I honestly, such a hard watch that, seeing Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, in tears. I mean, lip quivering, in actual tears rolling down her face.
And I think it's fair to say that we're not going to be part of the speculation about what is going on in Rachel Reeves' lives. That's not what this podcast is. It's not what we're about. It's a personal matter. We're going to be respectful of that. But it has been dominating the week in politics, and we are going to talk about the politics of the welfare reform, the pressure the government's under, the cracks that are beginning to show, and a lot more besides.
And what should be done about it. But I think the in terms of the choreography, a lot of people have been saying, but why did she go into PMQs if she was that upset? If she'd have not been in PMQs, the bond markets would have been even more spooked than they actually were. You do have to, if there's questions around the Chancellor, and it was inevitable that Kemi Badenoch was going to ask about the Chancellor, she had to be there. It would have been even more difficult to handle if she hadn't have been there. But there is also a question about what actually set her off, if you like. She didn't have an option not to go in. And, there's been lots of people have said to me that what really, the straw that broke the camel's back for her, what really triggered off her breaking into tears was the Speaker having a go at her on her way in. I've heard that from a number of people. I didn't see it myself, but have you heard anything about that, Beth?
Yeah, look, I was having a bit of an exchange with a Labour MP, a female Labour MP, this morning about it all, and just saying, like someone I know, I was like, what on earth did you make of it all? They said it was really horrible, and while it's not the Speaker's fault ultimately, he was the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm just quoting what they said to me.
Oh, right.
And then they said there are more Labour women than all the Tories combined, and the first rule of politics is learn to count. So I don't know if there's going to be there's a bit of ill feeling against the Speaker, and where is it a rise Caroline Noakes? You can't really get rid of the Speaker, can you?
I don't think it was an altercation with her. I think it was him having a go at her.
She said something like, reportedly, I'm under a lot of pressure. He had a go at her because he was annoyed at how she had behaved in Treasury questions, because I think he'd asked her to keep her answers shorter and she'd rolled her eyes or something, and he decided that he was going to take her to task on this.
Rachel will feel just mortified about this. She's not somebody who wears her heart on her sleeve. You know, some people are all completely out there with all their emotions, and they're very sort of public people with their emotions. And Rachel is a very dignified, sort of reserved person. So she will be absolutely mortified by finding herself in this situation and want to be getting right back on, rebuilding everybody's assurance that she's getting on with the job. And that's what she will absolutely do, because she's a kind of dutiful person. She will not want to have anybody distracted by, and as I say, she will be mortified, and that's why
she has more pressure than other chancellors because she's the first female chancellor. And if and one of the things you want to, first of all, I in a much much smaller scale, in a completely different universe, being the first kind of openly gay political leader in the UK, which I was at the time that I was elected. I really felt it. I felt like my first duty is to not be shit, so people don't think that all gay people are shit. And this sense that she's the first female chancellor, she will have, if she's, if she's as dutiful as you say she is, and all the indications are that she is, Harriet, her first sense will be that she can't mess this up, because it doesn't just reflect badly on her and her own sense of professional pride and what that means for the country and what it means for the Labour Party and all this other stuff, but she also doesn't want to let women down.
Also, Ruth, because Harriet, you think she should have gone into the chamber. I have a slightly different view to that. I'm interested to what I'm interested in what Ruth thinks as well, because I don't think she should have gone into the chamber. I think that
I think in context, I think if the choice, Beth, had been, are you going to cry on telly or are you going to be absent? Of course you're absent, because you don't want to cry on telly. But I don't think when she walked over to the house, she expected to be in
terrible,
tears.
Guys.
Yeah, she did look
seriously.
rough. She looked really, really rough. I get that.
I was on a train going to Wales. I was not in the chamber, and I'm on the train, and I can see these messages, and I go on to live television, and I took one look at her face, and she has, these are before the tears start, she just has these terrible...
But she was trying to do the right thing, to show up and to be there and sit next to the Prime Minister, and she was trying to do the right thing, and it all fell apart.
I get that, but actually, we live in a world, and this is visual media. I would never, ever, ever go anywhere near television. I do it every day, all day. If I was that upset and I wasn't sure that I could hold it together, I just wouldn't put myself in that position. In a way, she felt she had to be there because of all the things you said, Harriet. But actually, the thing, and this is why I feel massive sympathy for her, is that picture that has been rather cruelly, I think, blown up onto the front pages, with the tears really, exaggerated or whatever, you cannot undo that image, and that is going to be something that is kind of now part of her identity, and it could have just been avoided if she hadn't gone into the chamber. And yes, the markets would have been a bit antsy, but if the Prime Minister had said she's staying on for many years, I have complete confidence in her, there is a personal matter that she has to deal with today, and then if the markets got really antsy, roll her out later when she's a bit more put together for a pool clip.
But sometimes you can go in when you're very upset and you get into your professional mode and you style it out. So sometimes actually sitting there on the front bench can make you stronger and, less liable to break down. So she wouldn't have necessarily known that. But what happens is that all your officials leave you. There's the area behind the back of the Speaker's chair, and there's a sort of ante-room, and all your officials are outside of that. So actually, it's not just when you go into the chamber you're on your own. There's a sort of ante-room before then where officials aren't in. So she would have been like flying solo.
I think you're both right to a degree, and I think that there's something more fundamental that we haven't covered. And I think you're both right in that, Beth, you're 100% right about the visual media. This is absolutely a picture that's going to stay with people, and it's going to be up there in the same way as that picture of Theresa May at a European Brexit negotiation where she was sat at a table by herself with some crap flowers on it. And I don't know why the people around her didn't have at least one sort of staff member sitting with her, because what the fundamental rules are, you should never be alone and photographed alone, especially when you're under pressure, because you look like you're isolated and you're not in control. I think it's right up there with the rain falling on Rishi Sunak when he called the election. I also, however, agree with Harriet, and she'll have done this and I'll have done this, and I can't think that there's a professional female politician that hasn't done this, which is when you're absolutely in your boots and you've got to go onto something where you're going to be on telly, that actually that in some way that imperative to hold it together helps hold it together, and you put your armour on and you put your lipstick on and you put your mask on and you put your face on and you fucking get through it, because it is your job to get through it. And there's that little bit of grit in the oyster for all of us that know that, particularly because we're women, we have to keep it together.
And sometimes you can leave a private thing behind, but clearly not on this occasion.
So you just feel for both of you, because actually I don't know what it is like to walk in the shoes of very, very senior female politicians, and you both do. You think that probably she took the judgment call that I can probably get through this, and then found herself dissembling almost.
The more fundamental problem is none of this had to happen. She didn't have to be exposed like this. Harriet is right in previous pods. The welfare bill didn't have to be a bill that was constructed in this way. They thought they were being smart to push it through, to make it happen quickly, so that we didn't have all of the assessments about what was going to change and how it was going to change, which meant they didn't have to have the rearguard action. They didn't have to have all of these last minute concessions. They didn't have to blow Rachel Reeves's budget apart, and where she's going to find £5.5 billion by October, I have no idea, and I'm guessing neither does she. So her job's just been made a million times worse. And she also didn't have to have the spectacle of, that sense of having people lots around her, but looking so isolated, because the setup at PMQs is such that you can't actually put an arm around somebody. You can't get up and leave. You can't compose yourself. You can't,
that would have made it even worse.
Yeah, it's so hard. You're so isolated in that in your little seats behind the Prime Minister while he's talking, and all of this theatre's going on around you. And also then the situation that we brushed at, and I know we're going to come back to, which was the day later at this big NHS conference speech, this big 10-year plan, this big, Labour's year in power. Let's talk about the NHS, sing Kumbaya, because it's the one thing that binds Labour people together when the cracks are showing. It is wheeling her out to show that she was still alive and they hadn't locked the mad woman in the attic, but not letting her speak and just letting Wes and Keir and all the big boys that are around Keir do all of the talking on her behalf and answering questions about her mental health. I mean, it was Victorian, it was preposterous, and it could all have been avoided.
I just want to add one more thought about what happened in the Commons with Rachel Reeves, because the other reason that it matters is because she is the Chancellor, and that means she leads the country's finances, and she leads on that. Sorry, it matters because she's the Chancellor, and what happens to her actually has material impacts. And you saw that with the markets panicking on Wednesday afternoon because they did not know what the hell was going on with the Chancellor. She turns up at PMQs, she's in tears, the Prime Minister doesn't clearly back her. He, in fact, seems completely oblivious that she is crying next to him. What then happens is there is a spike in borrowing rates, government bonds, because the markets are now nervous that Rachel Reeves, with her fiscal rules and her economic stability, is about to get sacked or resign, right? So there was a material impact on what happened in the Commons yesterday. And that's why I go back to what I was saying, which is that it's not just about the human thing, about how I felt about seeing it, which was really uncomfortable. And I had massive sympathy for her. And I thought, there, for the grace of God, go all of us, because we've all had shit days in the office. And she had to have that put all over the front pages, and she can't undo that now. She has to live with that, and the haters will pile in and say it just shows that she's not up to being Chancellor, and bloody women and they're all emotional. It's just all of the things that she has been completely building against for years and years. But it also matters because she has to present in a certain way, because actually it affects government borrowing rates, right? And that's another reason I just think that all of that shouldn't have happened, and she should have, in a way, I don't think it was for her in that moment, obviously, to make decisions, because, you know, when you're really emotional and you're trying to hold it together. But I just don't think that she should have been put in that position, and actually don't think that the Prime Minister should have put her in that position either. And I don't think she seems to have been very well supported.
I mean, they say that a week is a long time in politics. I couldn't even get straight in my head before I sat down for this podcast where we'd gotten to last time, because it feels as if about a month has passed since our last podcast, and we were talking about how the vote was going to go on welfare. So maybe we could just rewind a little bit and explain exactly what happened and where it happened and where it started. I don't know. I mean, Beth, you've been following every twist and turn of this. You might be the best person to lead us through this.
Look, let's go back to last Thursday. We had been talking that morning about the welfare reforms. We'd all agreed that there was going to be some concessions and climb downs. Anyway, that night, they reversed some of the plans. So they decided that those that were already on personal independent payments and were getting the health element of universal credit, existing claimants, nothing was going to change for them. And what they were going to do instead was they were going to tighten the eligibility criteria for future claimants. Now, the government had offered the concessions, and then it was up to individual MPs to decide. But I think it's fair to say by Friday morning, there was a view that, OK, nothing to see here, drama over, concessions made, and off we were going off to the races, and the bill was going to pass. That is not what happened, was it?
It never looked as if that concession was going to be enough, because it didn't have anything other than a sticking plaster smell to it.
Then what happened was, on Tuesday, I come in and there has been another amendment tabled on Monday night, which again is going to wreck the bill. And MPs are now saying, actually, just pull the bill, because they did not like this sense of a two-tier system in which some people got their benefits, and then if you claimed in the future, you wouldn't. And what they actually wanted, and then actually it could have been 3 tiers, because then after the Timms review reported, because the Timms review was going to look at the eligibility criteria, they might have changed it again. So you would have had 3 different sets of people. You would have had the existing ones, the ones that were going to hit by the tightening of the criteria, and then the Timms review being implemented that could have changed the criteria again. Then what happened on Tuesday, because I'm covering it, was Meg Hillier comes out in the morning and says she approves it. And then we're watching the Commons, and Helen Hayes is very critical. Sarah Owen, another leading rebel, very critical. Debbie Abraham's another leading rebel, just like not voting for it. And you're like, ooh, this isn't going, this
all
feels...
select committee chairs.
I mean, I had people from the government phoning me trying to find out what I knew about what the MPs were doing. I mean, it was cat on a hot tin roof time. Meanwhile, Angela Rayner is in the Commons negotiating with the rebels, whilst Liz Kendall is in the House. And they are literally, the bill, the tiny bill, it's only got 5 clauses, is literally falling apart in front of us. Liz Kendall doesn't even know. She's in the chamber saying we're going to stick to this plan. And meanwhile, outside the chamber, Angela Rayner can see the writing on the wall, saying they're going to lose the vote.
And then
so
a couple of hours
Yeah.
before the vote, when the bill is being debated for
Yeah.
its second reading, Stephen Timms, the junior minister responsible for welfare reform, gets up and says, we are dropping clause 5
There
of this
is.
5-clause bill,
Yeah.
and there's only going to be 4 left. But at that point, there were still rebels who then rebelled against it. But at that point, the bill was no longer making any savings for the public purse.
That's
in fact,
the
it was going
point.
to cost
Yeah.
the public purse more.
So what they end up saying to the rebels is, we will not implement any changes to PIP until after the Timms review has reported. So the disability groups will work with Stephen Timms. They will look at the whole PIP system. They will recommend changes, and then we will implement it. And at that point, we will start maybe tightening benefits or not, depending on what the Timms review concludes, right? But the point was, that meant that the savings had gone. So if you want to know why Rachel Reeves is so bloody agitated, at a stroke of a pen, probably something she did not want, Angela Rayner agrees with the rebels, signed off by the PM, that they're now going to can all of the changes that would have saved the $5 billion, which was the whole point of bringing forward the changes in the first place. You know, when they were criticising it, the MPs back in March, before the spring statement. And it's all gone. So Rachel Reeves now has to find the money. The Prime Minister's bill has effectively collapsed. He's completely folded on welfare reform, all because his MPs were going to vote him down. It's an absolute shower. It's a shambles.
Can I just say, I never understood up until this week why people really thought Angela Rayner had a bit about her and why she was spoken as a future leader and all the rest of it. Because I saw somebody that was clearly ambitious and who had a great backstory and all the rest of it. But, you know, she never struck me as that light on her feet. She was gobby and played to the Labour base and did a good Prescott and stuff. But I tell you what, she played a blinder this week, and suddenly you've got a Prime Minister who has lost the support of his own party less than a year into office. You've got a Chancellor that has been reduced to tears in the front benches that now has to find £5 billion of savings. You're handing next year's lines to take if the Tory party has anything about them in the UK, which is same old Labour taxing you till the pipsqueak, because after October, to fill that hole, they're going to have to do something, and it won't all come out of borrowing, so there will be tax rises. And the person that's come out of this as the hero is Angela Rayner, and at the same time she just drops into conversation, oh yes, and by the way, I'm going to set up my own office of the Deputy Prime Minister outside of my Department of Housing, in the Cabinet Office, and I'm going to run it as my own little fiefdom, and I'm going to have my own little staff the same way as Prescott did, and I'm setting up a complete alternative power base. And Keir Starmer, by the way, try and face me down because you're not strong enough right now. She has got absolute cojones of steel, and this is the first time I've properly seen it. And she gets to be the hero because she brokered the deal. So, like, she's the good guy in all of this.
But there's two ways he could respond to the situation about Angela Rayner. One is to feel defensive about it and that it's somehow undermining his power and that he's got to find ways to sort of fence her in. Or to actually recognise that she's a great communicator, that she's popular, people like her, and actually he needs to pull her into his leadership and use her for what she can actually bring, in the way that Tony Blair did use John Prescott to actually augment his premiership.
This is from an MP that was kind of obviously very plugged in, and I was asking them about Angela Rayner and what was it that the government misread so badly about the parliamentary party, and this person said to me that that Keir and Rachel, that basically Keir and Rachel don't really trust their lieutenants. The whips have been screaming how badly this would go, and they haven't been listened to. The Secretaries of State, and I assume that means Liz Kendall, has also been trying to flag this. And they argue, this person, they said the problem is that Keir and Rachel are being absolutist and don't have a jot of emotional intelligence between them. And what they say about Angela is that she is all about emotional intelligence. And whereas the PM and the Chancellor, this is this person's view, they think when people are complaining about stuff, it's because they're weak. And then they're out-politicked by Angela Rayner because she can read the room and she can politically manoeuvre around in a way that both Rachel Reeves and the Prime Minister struggle with. Harriet, do you see that?
I think that she has got exactly the attributes that Ruth says. And, she can play a really important role. But the point is, it needs to be not a role in shut out of Keir Starmer's premiership or in opposition to Keir Starmer, but it needs to be absorbed into his leadership. And then she is a massive asset.
Some people would say that Rachel Reeves was the architect of this, in that she was looking for welfare savings ahead of the spring statement to help her out of the fiscal black hole, which she now still has. So that was a lot of blood spilt for absolutely no reason. But even so, she needed to be shored up, because this is a joint thing between her and the Prime Minister, and somehow it ends up that it looks like she's the one that's isolated, she's the one that everyone's saying should resign, she's the one that's hung out to dry, and what the markets were actually saying was, well, we quite like Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules, actually, and the idea that somehow Rachel Reeves gets deposed and then we get some other chancellor in that maybe won't try and hold the line on fiscal responsibility and all the things she's been arguing. Well, the markets didn't like that at all. Labour MPs might want her gone, some of them, but that's not what the markets were signalling yesterday. The markets were signalling that she was, as I said, the last bastion, sort of stop it, like the last line of defence against a load of Labour MPs that just want to tax loads and spend loads, right? That's what the markets are saying.
There are two contrasting worlds, which is the money markets and the bond markets, who are expressing confidence in Rachel Reeves because she is saying if we can get the public finances stabilised, we can then build growth on top of that. And they have confidence in what she's trying to do with the infrastructure proposals that are coming forward. They actually believe in her and her plan. And we should clock that. That's a great asset for the Labour government
I'll
to
tell
have
you what,
that
though,
confidence.
She's got an absolute nightmare coming up now, hasn't she? I mean, number one, the idea that the Labour government is going to be able to lift or amend the two-child benefit cap, I think it's gone. I just don't think.
Well, that is a real irony, isn't it? That
do you not think it's gone, Harriet?
It becomes financially, but also politically more difficult to abolish the two-child benefit cap. Two reasons.
Shelved?
But I think that it's more difficult for the government to look as though it's being pushed by the PLP to do it. So that looks like more political weakness. And financially, there's less money available to actually do it. So what a paradox that what's been done on this welfare bill has actually made it less easy to do what might well have been done in the autumn, which is deal with the two-child benefit cap. But I think although Rachel Reeves is in a very big hole and it's very difficult, she is also the solution to the problem.
Yeah, but she's going to have to raise taxes, isn't she? She's going to have to raise tax.
She has to. Unless she breaks her fiscal rules, which is the one thing that
we are now utterly tipped into that territory, which I think is incredibly unfortunate, that we've got to be having the debate dominated now between now and the budget about tax raising. And I think that is extremely an unfortunate consequence of what's been happening over the last few days. And who knows where we'll be in terms of this so-called headroom by the time we get to the autumn. But that's now where the narrative is. So, the job has got much more difficult, but it's a job they've got to do.
So we had come into today's pod thinking that we're going to do a health check on a year of Labour, and also ask the rest of you to do the same. I mean, it has slightly been overtaken by events, but we did want to hear your voices, and thank you everybody that's been in touch with the burner phone. And we're going to start with Eileen.
My feeling is one of terrible disappointment in this first year. I'm a lifelong Labour voter and reach my 70th birthday soon. It seems to me that the party is not getting the story of values across at all. Rather, they keep moving and reacting to right-wing narratives. I think Starmer is a show not tell person.
I'm sorry to say that I'm ashamed I voted for this government. I decided to resign my membership of the Labour Party before the election because of Starmer's position on Gaza. The very idea that Starmer, again, as a human rights lawyer, said nothing in defence of trans people is embarrassing. Honestly, I find him to be a total and utter disgrace, and I have never felt more let down by someone I was so positive about.
Sadly, I feel the country is going in the wrong direction. Taxes are very high, public services keep getting worse, and it's harder than ever to invest or grow a business. In my work, I see more and more friends and clients either leaving the UK or seriously thinking about it.
Wow, that was Eileen in Bristol, Ronaldo in London, and Sinead, who's from Birmingham, but now lives in the Highlands. So, look, thank you all for sending those in. Harriet, I mean, what about you? How much of this week will define Starmer's first year? You've got all of the U-turns. He's trying to pivot today to talk about a 10-year plan about the NHS. But look, this has been... I don't think I'm over-egging it when I say that this has been the most difficult and dangerous week of his premiership. What do they need, a reset? Is this a different era of politics? Is the country ungovernable? Is the party ungovernable?
Well, I think what people are saying, and it's very, poignant to hear what people are saying, is how disappointed they feel and how their hopes have not been realised. And I think that Keir Starmer has recognised in his interviews he did for his first anniversary, a series of interviews, that he quashed people's hope in order to explain to people how difficult it was going to be and what a long road it was going to be to set the public services and the economy back on track. He kind of squished the hope or any sense of a better future out of people, and that he wants to change that. I think that he then more or less blew up his own anniversary by scheduling this very controversial bill in the week of the first anniversary. So I think it's quite hard to see the first anniversary as anything other than completely overhung.
I mean, Ruth, you led the Scottish Conservative Party, yeah. You had to lead your troops.
No, I just,
to their biggest vote ever. To their biggest vote ever.
Yeah, but you.
I thought you were starting with, so everyone's saying that this party's a bit of a shambles. Ruth, you led the Scottish Conservatives. I thought that was your segue there. I was like, oh, look at that drive-by shooting that's just occurred.
No, you defied gravity up there because
wouldn't do that
loads of Labour people loved you as well.
What I was actually going to ask you was, I mean, presumably you read some of the interviews he did. He did an interview on Friday in The Observer with Tom Baldwin, who is both his biographer and his friend. I wouldn't say it was a neutral piece, but it was fascinating in terms of the insights into the Prime Minister and the fact Starmer does open up a bit to Tom, probably because they are friends and it is probably a safe space. And then he did another piece with the Sunday Times. He talked about his regret over the island of strangers. He talked about, things that have gone wrong. I mean, Ruth, what would you have done at this point if you were Starmer in the situation he is? Do you have some sympathy for him?
Well, I think what was that piece that you talk about, that Tom Baldwin piece in The Observer, was really interesting to me. And what came through was how many regrets, apologies, I got it wrong, mea culpas that were in it. So there was a sort of an acknowledgement that he was too negative at the start and he had to readjust in terms of how he was talking about the country. He held his hands up, he got the island of strangers speech wrong, didn't understand what it meant, didn't hear the echoes of Enoch Powell.
Hadn't read the speech.
But also acknowledged that, the Sue Gray stuff wasn't handled well, that Freebiegate had caused an issue that he didn't see coming. And that's before you get to having to reverse stuff on winter fuel allowance and on the welfare debacle, because the interview happened before this week. And there was a sense to me that, there's only so many mistakes that you get to make. Hold your hand up and say, I'm really sorry, but I really do have a plan that everyone should stay on board with, before the public just stop believing you, stop listening, before they just see you as, a continuous kind of calamity Keir type figure. And I think, we're really close to, the way the elections fell, we're really close to a parliamentary recess. So Parliament's not going to be happening for a while. The government's got the biggest microphone. It can get on the front foot for several weeks. It can work through the holiday period. But actually there should be a team in number 10 that go in and they just spend a couple of days just completely workshopping, and being honest about where they've gone wrong, how they do a rebuild, how they get the politics of politics right. Because actually some of the governing stuff has been all right, has been okay. Some of the international stuff has reflected well. Some of that's been luck, some of it's been judgment, some of it's been a combination. But you need a bit of both.
And they should have Angela Rayner in with that workshopping.
Well, I think you pick, I mean, a lot of that will be the staff and the advisory team and the comms team and all the rest of it. It needs to have Keir in there at some point, but not for the whole kind of period. It also needs to have some key lieutenants in there, and I would say probably Rachel's deputy in the Treasury, so the Treasury's across it. Probably Keir needs to come in and out. He needs to agree the agenda for it. He needs to work on it. But they just need to be really honest about where the mess ups happened, why they happened, how they fix them. Not how they put a sticking plaster over it, but how they stop what they're a symptom of happening again. So is it because they're not talking to backbenchers? Is it because they're not checking enough where the attacks are going to come from? Is it because they don't have enough people that can kick them around in terms of the planning stage? and they just think that everybody will see things the way they see things, because they often seem to have been caught out by the type of criticism they get, and is there even a kernel of truth in it? So how do you protect yourself against that? You know, it's just been caught out so many times.
As well as Angela Rayner being in there for that sort of deliberation, they need the chair of the PLP as well. But I think the idea that they've been part of causing a problem and they alone can solve it, it's by engaging with those other parts of the party that they can solve those problems.
Completely, because the Tories are not laying a glove on them. Reform, is going off doing reform things, and it's being all things to all people, but it's not actually doing any damage in Parliament. In terms of the disasters that have befallen the Labour government since they've come in, they are entirely of their own making. So they have to be honest about where they've messed up, what their failures have been, and how they can shore it up for the future. And, they had an idea of what they wanted to do in government. They had the benefit of opposition. They had time to build a narrative. How have they been blown off course, and how do they get back to that? And I think that there needs to be a bit of time spent on self-reflection, big deep breath, relaunch in September.
In terms of the bandwidth, we've talked about it, haven't we? Like, the Prime Minister has been at full tilt across international crises, but that's not an excuse for a domestic crisis blowing up. And if he can't be across it, then having a team of people working on it back at base. And I have felt this week, having covered it, that there has been a total stick your fingers in the ears. And someone said to me from Downing Street, when we did not have our fingers in the ears, we had our ears. We were talking to MPs about the welfare stuff for a long, long time. So, okay, they were talking about it, but they clearly misjudged it. They misjudged they misread the room. And then today, when he seemed so determined to turn the first year anniversary into my NHS plan, I'm like, you cannot do that when your welfare bill has been torpedoed by a mutinous party, and just say, oh, well, there are lessons to be learnt, I take responsibility. I'm like, well, in what way do you take responsibility? Tell me about what taking responsibility looks like. What are you going to change? Let's talk about that. Why don't you do an interview about that? And what they've been trying to do all week is just bat it off, ignore the questions. So we end up, it's the first year anniversary, off we go to the NHS 10-year plan. We've all got one question. Of course we're going to ask him about the welfare, his MPs, his authority, his reflections on that. And when I did ask him about that, he literally just ignored my question and then ran through all the achievements of the Labour government. PM, your first year anniversary has been marked by a self-inflicted shambles over welfare that's left you and your Chancellor wounded. You've U-turned on your reforms, your MPs don't trust you, and markets worry that you've lost resolve on fiscal discipline. It's the epitome, isn't it, of sticking plaster politics and chaos that you promised voters you would end. You say it's your responsibility, so can you explain to our viewers how you got this so wrong and what you intend to do to rebuild your trust and authority in your party? And if I may, I know it's long, sorry. Chancellor, first, it's really good to see you today. It's really good to see you here. But Prime Minister, I have to ask you, on a human level, people were shocked and baffled that in the Commons yesterday you did not offer your Chancellor your support. Was it because you didn't see what was happening, or did you not know what to do? Thank you.
Well, Beth, let me just clear that up straight away. I didn't appreciate what was happening because, as you will probably appreciate, the PMQs is pretty wired. It goes from question to question, and I'm literally up, down, question, looking at who's asking me a question, thinking about my response, and getting up and answering it. And so it wasn't just yesterday. No Prime Minister ever has had side conversations during PMQs. It does happen in other debates when there's a bit more time, but in PMQs, it is bang, bang, bang. That's what it was yesterday, and therefore I was probably the last to appreciate anything else going on in the chamber. That's just a straightforward human explanation. Common sense explanation, if you like. In relation to your invitation to tell your viewers what we've achieved in the first year of a Labour government, I'm very pleased to say we've brought down waiting lists. We promised 2 million extra appointments. We've delivered 4 million extra appointments. We've begun the project to build 1.5 million houses, particularly social and affordable houses. In schools, we have introduced breakfast clubs, really important for children so they're ready to learn when they get to school. We've rolled out free school meals to 500,000 more children, hugely important to them. We're just doing more on childcare. That comes on stream in September. So that is 9 months to 4 years free childcare across the country. We're ramping up and introducing the biggest upgrade in employment rights for a generation. We've got record investment into the country. Just last week, Amazon put in 40 billion investment into this country in jobs. That's one of the biggest single investments that has ever been made.
You were going to lose a vote in the House of Commons. Are you just in denial? You've totally ignored my question.
No, I'm not, and we didn't get the process there right, but I think it's right that if we're looking at the entire year, that we look at all the things we've delivered, and I always do this through the eyes of the working people up and down the country that we came into government to serve.
There have been achievements, but if you actually deny the basic truth, which is you've really messed up, you've let your MPs down or they're angry with you, you haven't made the argument, and you haven't managed to get your flagship bill through, like, take it on the chin, acknowledge that's happened, explain why you made the mistake, explain how you're going to fix it, and then move on. But I think this thing where there's a sort of a denial thing, it's like, you said you would do politics differently and that you would you would level with the public, you do politics differently, you weren't going to do stick in plaster politics. What does it look like? I just don't get it's not just is it a comms strategy? I don't get it.
I keep forgetting that Keir Starmer has actually not been an MP that long. And yes, he's got to, he was a frontbencher under Corbyn. He was like the Brexit spokesman and all the rest of it. So he's done frontbench roles, and he's clearly a man that's had a career behind him where he's gotten to the top in his first chosen career and now in his second as well. So he's got abilities. But there is something in politics where it's not just about not making mistakes. There is something about how you front up when you have.
Yeah.
And you can actually come out of a point of severe pressure stronger than you went in if you're able to take the hits. And you're able to not take it personally and be like, yeah, fair one. Yeah, but this is how we're going to do the reset and this is how we're going to move on. Absolutely much better if he does a St. Sebastian, ties himself to a tree, takes 15 arrows, and he did it earlier in the week, then clears the decks, and if he wanted to do a relaunch speech about the NHS, you would have felt it as your professional duty, having answered all your questions previously, that you would have to ask him about why he was there for. But because he hadn't even attempted it, he was just trying to escape past it, you've got no option. Like, you professionally are bound to ask him these questions. It's part of your job. Like, you're not doing your job if you don't. So how did the people around him who've got professional comms experience, there's professional journalists that are in there too, not see that? It's such a blind spot.
Ruth, I'm really glad you said that, because I actually feel, and I increasingly feel, having done this job now for a while, that part of the barrier between Keir Starmer connecting with the public is that he isn't straight about things sometimes, because he thinks it's better to paper over the cracks. So he's doing this sort of weird sort of Jekyll and Hyde thing where he's doing hand-wringing mea culpas in print journalism that people will read, but when he's in front of a camera, he's either defensive or he's obfuscating, he's trying to avoid the question. And actually, why doesn't he just apply a bit of what he's doing in the print press into how he actually speaks to the public?
Stuff like, oh yeah, so we were right to take the winter fuel allowance off some pensioners, but we're also right to now reverse that. Well, come on now, it can't be both of them. And then 3 months later to say, well, actually we were kind of wrong about both, but also just in the way in which it's presented and when challenged, this like dead batting it, it doesn't work. You have to absorb and give back. It's a two-way street.
I have to say as well that in terms of the pressure, I mean, even before the folding of even before the complete retreat on the welfare reforms, people within government, at the top of government, were admitting to me that given the concessions that they had to make, and that was before the really big ones on Tuesday, that they were acknowledging that it's just going to get harder to govern the party, and it's going to get harder to get things through Parliament, because having had that massive majority, once MPs understand that they can bounce him, they will be coming back for more. One of the Rebel MPs said to me, well, I think they should raise wealth taxes. Another Rebel MP said she needs to loosen the fiscal rules. So you can see these things running into the autumn. So they're going to have to get robust. They're going to have to really come back together, him and his Chancellor. And I think they're just going to have to be more front-footed, less flat-footed, and start making the arguments and be a bit more aggressive, actually, in what they're trying to do. Before we go, look, we've had a bit of different insight from Nathaniel. He's had cancer treatment in the last few years, and he featured in Labour's 2024 campaign. And actually, I also saw him at the marathon, because he ran the London Marathon. So I bumped into Nathaniel down there. Anyway, he did a warm-up speech at one of Keir Starmer's event. He got in touch with us too, and he says, having put his name to the Labour campaign, he's been looking for positives. So this is what Nathaniel had to say to us.
I have good reason to believe that behind the scenes, things have been steadily getting going in Labour's first year in office. For example, the policies I put my name to in the election campaign were to deliver more appointments, more scans, extend more shifts to evenings and weekends. And now fast forward to a Sunday afternoon last autumn, and I was in and out for a CT scan in 15 minutes. So it's happening. I mean, look, the NHS drastically let me down in 2022, but I've noticed like fewer cancelled appointments this year. And one thing that really warmed my heart, it's not a government bill, but just as significant for dying people like me, has been the Prime Minister keeping his promise to allow the terminally ill adults bill, assisted dying, to progress through Parliament. In conclusion, no government will get everything right, surely, but I genuinely believe our government has the intent and ambition to make this country function properly.
So that's Nathaniel. And actually, Ruth, we have given the government a pretty hard time in this pod. But if you have a massive rebellion within your first year, when you've got a massive majority, you are really laying yourself open for some criticism. But you know, I mean, Starmer would say, I've been underestimated all through my career. We are getting on with repairing the NHS. We're putting our industrial strategy in place, the spending review. And he would say that they are building the foundations to actually improve people's lives. I just think sometimes that rhetoric is not really matching with what they're doing because of the U-turns and the lack of clear direction.
And I guess that's what Keir Starmer is banking on. He's thinking if we do the tough stuff now at the start, if we're able to point to the fact that your life is better, you've got more money in your pocket, you've got a better system of seeing a GP or a hospital appointment when we get in now 4 years' time to the next election, that's something that we can hang our hats on. And I think the difficulty that it's going to have is whether people will really feel it, because sometimes it takes a while for numbers to actually become sort of something that you can touch and feel when you're a constituent or a voter, and whether the kind of all of the other stuff that we've been talking about obscures that.
Well, look, let's wrap this pod, not least because Harriet's deserted us. She's got some very important...
She's very important. She's got lots to do.
But me and Ruth are still here. So I'm rolling into Friday. I mean, I'm going up to Norfolk. I'm going to try and get in the sea because I was trapped in London in the heat wave last weekend and it was an inferno. And now I'm going to go to Norfolk, get in the sea, and it'll be cold. But never mind. What are you going to do, Ruth?
Well, as you know, from this time last year when the election was called, I flew back from my family holiday in Spain because the school summer holidays have already started in Scotland. Yeah. So that the schools are off. So I've been doing lots of childcare. I've just had 2 days away in York with my son on a mini break to let my partner Jen have a bit of peace and quiet while she's working from home. She is off to the Coastal Rowing Skiffy World Championships for the next week. Yeah. She's got 2 crews that she's in, over 40s women's and over 40s mixed. So she's going to be a world championship contender, which means that I am left driving the domestic bus for an entire week on my own. Son, dogs, everything. So I'm gearing up for that. So I'm going to be deep in proper kind of home care, parent care, dog care, all of it.
Okay, so you obviously.
And
won't
I'm
have
really
time.
proud of it. So shout out to Jen and to all the
Jen,
crew
yeah.
from the rowing club.
And so
up to them.
Ruth Davidson will not be available for this pod next week because she'll be doing
I'll be frazzled.
doggy sitting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go to Norfolk and have a long lie down because it has been another mental week in politics. Well, look, we got to go, but look, don't forget to WhatsApp us. We love hearing from you. 07934 200 444. And if you don't follow us on your podcast app or watch us on YouTube, put one of those things right this weekend just for us. Subscribe. Anyway, thanks for listening. It's been another doozy of a week in Westminster. See you next week. Goodbye.
See ya. Bye.